the 4x4x48. What did I learn from doing it last year? So I'm going to start off by saying it's definitely not easy, and it's both physically and mentally draining. So I think it's going to be super useful to go over what I learned last time. Just quickly, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the 4x4x48 challenge involves you running 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours, which I think is an awesome challenge because most people can do it in some format.
You can do it!
Now that definitely takes a few minutes to get your head around, but once you start to realize there's a lot of logistics and there's a lot of things to consider when you're trying to successfully complete the challenge. For example, when do you sleep in that time? When do you eat? How much do you eat? Do you stretch? How do you pace it? All of these things are important questions, so I'm going to touch on all of these points in this video. To answer these in the most concise way I can, I'm going to break it up into sections. So here's what I'm going to cover. First of all, we're going to look at recovery and sleep, which is obviously a big factor for lasting 48 hours. Then we're going to look at nutrition. There's a few things I definitely could have done better last time, and you do burn a significant amount of calories, but you don't have massive eating windows either. Then I'm going to talk about route planning, which can make this significantly harder or easier, and I'm definitely wanting to make the challenge easier this time around. Then lastly, pacing, which is also going to be super important, as you can imagine, having to do 12 runs over 48 hours. Alrighty then, let's dive in with recovery and sleep. One of the biggest aspects of this challenge is the sleep deprivation thing. And obviously nutrition plays a role in recovery, but sleep is huge. So throughout the 48 hours, you're running every 4 hours. So it's unlikely you'll manage to sleep much more than 2 to 3 hours in a row, which is pretty disruptive, and it's not like you can try and sleep between every single run because you've got to eat and you've got to do other things. But last time I managed sleep pretty well, and I did this by having a large sleeping window. That sounds pretty obvious, but there's a tendency, particularly at the start of the challenge, to feel pretty pumped up and just go to sleep at your normal time or even slightly later. But I definitely benefited from banking some sleep early on in the challenge and allowing myself to sleep a little bit more in the mornings. So for example, after my second run of the 12 at 8:40 p.m, I went straight to sleep. Now, this is much earlier than I would usually go to sleep, but it worked well since I had to be up at midnight and at 4 a.m. to do a run. Then in the morning, I went to sleep after my 8 a.m. run, and normally I would be well awake by this time of day. So having that large sleep window was awesome for each 24-hour period, starting at roughly 8:40 p.m. and ending at about 11:30 before the 12 o'clock lunchtime run. Then in more of the daytime hours, I could eat and do other things. So it's kind of not easy to bank that sleep early on, but I definitely think it's useful, and if you can do that on the first night, that will greatly help you through that first night, and then it's a bit easier to do it come the second night. Now, like I said, nutrition plays a big role in recovery, which is important, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But there's other things that you might want to consider, like foam rolling, stretching, contrast baths, salt baths, and massage. Now, personally, I did a little bit of stretching, a little bit of rolling, some salt baths, but not massive amounts and not any kind of structure to it. Just, it mostly helped me to mentally relax rather than making much difference to how my body felt. The body just hurt because there's a lot of running and it's a difficult challenge, but it was mentally nice knowing I was doing everything in my power to kind of recover and switch off, and that in itself left me more ready to go again. Another thing you might want to consider is planning some stuff in the downtime, probably things that just help you chill. So watching films, being with the family, or shooting noobs on Halo 3. All of these things I think just help you switch off and de-stress, which is important when you know you've got a run coming up and you don't want to be stressing and worrying about the next 10 runs, for example. You just want to relax, chill, and I think that's super important for recovery, and maybe some of the physical stuff might help you a little bit as well. Before we talk about route planning then, let's talk about one of the big ones, and that is nutrition. There's two big things here that I think are super important. One of which is that you don't have loads of time between running, which means digesting food might be a challenge in itself, and we all know running with a stitch just absolutely sucks. And then secondly, you're probably burning around 500 to 700 calories per run, and it's 12 runs over a 48-hour period. So it's probably an additional 3,000 calories per day you're burning through. So you can see where the challenge is here. You've got less time to eat, less time to digest, but you're also burning through a lot of energy that you want to replenish so that you feel good and are capable to do the runs. Now, I actually went wrong with my nutrition a couple of times, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, but you're probably going to want to eat more than normal to keep your energy levels up. But it's probably not a good idea to eat loads of big meals that are hard to digest. So I would just suggest lots of calorie and carb dense snacks. So lots of Percy pigs, jelly snakes, or even flat coat, because you want the glycogen levels to stay up throughout the challenge, giving you energy for the running, but without having to eat loads of heavy stuff that's difficult to digest and might leave you end up having a stitch. So for me, last time I really wanted to make sure I had enough energy for the runs, so I was just chucking in food left, right and center. And also the lack of sleep left me eating more, because it was kind of, I was looking for food to energy. So I definitely went overboard on the food a couple of times, which meant I ended up feeling super heavy, like a slug, or getting a stitch for a couple of the runs, which is something I'll definitely try and avoid next time by just being more conscious about how much I'm eating and maybe tracking the calories that I'm having so I'm not going way overboard. But it's definitely important to keep those energy levels high. Oh, and another thing to remember is you're going to be sweating a lot more than usual. 12 runs in that 48-hour period is a lot of running. Your body temperature is going to be higher, you're going to be sweating more. So you might want to consider some electrolytes or some salt tablets, and obviously stay nice and hydrated through the entire thing. You don't want to be cramping up or just losing performance because you're dehydrated. So you always want to be taking on water just little and often, not loads at any one point because obviously you want to avoid the stitch, but just continuously taking on water so you're not dehydrated. Now, route planning. This can be a game changer, and I think it's a good idea to have a variety of different routes planned, as many different ones as you can, just to keep things interesting. Last time I had 2 or 3, and hopefully this time I'll have a little bit more. Now, if you want to make this challenge harder, then obviously go for hillier routes. And I can tell you now that massively made a difference to how my legs felt last time. I wasn't purposely picking difficult routes, but to get out of my village and run anywhere, I had to run up some sort of hill, which over the 48 hours just ruined the baby cows. So the difference between a flat and a hilly 48 miles I think is obviously huge. So that's something you might want to consider when you're looking to try and successfully complete the challenge. If you're just trying to get round, or maybe you're doing it for the first time, it might be best to pick flat routes and many different ones to keep it nice and interesting. Another thing on route planning is something I forgot about last time, which is how well lit the routes are. Obviously from a safety point of view, this is important, but also mentally. A few of my runs were in complete pitch black last time, no street light at all, which is pretty eerie, but also mind-numbing not being able to see or hear much for 30 to 40 minutes. This did mean though, when it came to the daylight runs, it just felt absolutely awesome being able to see stuff. On to pacing. Now, we all know pacing is important when it comes to running, and I think this challenge only amplifies that, because not only do you have to pace each run, but you're also trying to pace yourself over the entire challenge of the 12 runs. So if you hit the first few runs pretty hard, you can easily make the last 8 or so extremely hard or just impossible to complete. I think the key thing to remember when it comes to pacing something like this is you're not going to gain loads of extra rest or recovery time by absolutely smashing the 4 miles as fast as you can. Maybe you'll gain 5 minutes or so, but the fatigue generated to gain that 5 minutes far outweighs what it's worth. So unless you've done it before or you're going for really good times, it's worth going at a comfortable pace you can sustain. Probably slightly easier and slower than you would like to. Then you can always smash it the last couple of runs if you're feeling strong after the first 40 miles. So there's loads of other stuff you can talk about in regards to this challenge, and I think it's an awesome one to do. I think it's both rewarding from a mental point of view and also physically, and most of us can do it in some form. If you can't run the 4 miles, maybe walk it, maybe cycle it, maybe do some skipping instead, maybe use the cross trainer. Everyone can do it in some form, and it's just an awesome challenge to do over a 48-hour period because it massively tests you mentally and helps you grow in this way, I think personally. So that's what I learned from last time, and hopefully that's helpful for you if you're thinking about doing it again or in the future. Let me know if you are, comment below if you're doing it, comment below if you've done it before, and any tips and tricks that you found super useful. That might help me going into doing it again next time. But until my next video, have an awesome one and good luck with the challenge if you're doing it. I'll see you in the next one.